Elias Thorne didn't need a reflection to tell him who he was. The mountains did that. The jagged peaks of the Tetons, the biting frost that claimed his toes every February, and the way his own hands looked, scarred, calloused, and stained with the grease of 1,000 lonely meals. He was a man made of stone and shadow, living on a ranch that felt more like a fortress than a home. But that morning, the shadow moved. Elias was at the forge, the orange glow of the embers, the only warmth in a world turned blue by the dawn. He heard the horse before he saw the rider, a stumble in the snow, a heavy, exhausted breath. He didn't reach for his pistol. Not yet. Out here, death didn't usually knock. It just walked in. The rider was a woman. She was wrapped in a coat 3 sizes too big, caked in frozen mud and the salt of a long journey. She didn't fall off the horse. She slid, her boots hitting the frozen dirt with a hollow thud. Her face was pale, her lips a shade of purple that made Elias's chest tighten with a memory he'd tried to bury. She looked up at him, her eyes bloodshot but burning with a desperate, frantic light. She reached into her coat and pulled out a crumpled piece of parchment, stained with tobacco and something darker. "Are you the one they call the ghost of Blackwood?" she rasped. Her voice was like dry leaves on a grave. Elias didn't answer. He just watched the way her hands shook. "I have the money," she said, her voice getting sharper, louder. She pulled a heavy leather pouch from her belt and tossed it. It landed in the snow between them with a heavy, metallic clink. 500 gold eagles. Half now, half when Silas Vane is dead. They said you were the best. They said you were a monster when a gun was in your hand. I hope you're following this story, folks. Let me know in the comment. Elias looked at the pouch. Then he looked at her. He didn't see a client. He saw a girl standing on the edge of a cliff, looking for a reason to jump. He stepped out of the heat of the forge. The cold hit him, but he didn't flinch. He walked past her, picked up the reins of her horse, and began leading it toward the barn. "Hey!" she shouted, stumbling after him. "I'm talking to you. I paid for a killer. I paid for a man who doesn't miss. I didn't ride 3 days through a blizzard to watch an old rancher play nursemaid to a horse." Elias stopped. He turned slowly, the way a mountain turns toward the sun. He looked at her, really looked at her, the shape of her jaw, the way her left eyebrow had a tiny notch in it. "The horse needs grain," Elias said. His voice was deep and used, like a door that hadn't been opened in a decade. "And you need a fire. The gold isn't going anywhere. Neither is Silas Vane." She stood there in the snow, her chest heaving, her eyes filling with sudden angry wetness. "You're not him," she spat, her voice trembling. "You're not the man I paid for. You're just another tired old man waiting to die in the dirt." Elias felt a ghost of a smile touch the corners of his mouth. It wasn't a happy look. It was the look of a man who knew exactly how much the dirt cost. "Maybe," Elias whispered, "but the fire is hot inside. Come in or don't. The crows will have you either way by sundown." She came in. She didn't have a choice. For the next 3 hours, Elias didn't say a word. He did what men like him do when the world gets too loud. He moved with a purpose that didn't require breath. He stoked the fire until the cabin glowed like the inside of a lantern. He sliced thick slabs of salt pork and set them in the iron skillet, the smell of rendering fat filling the room, pushing back the scent of the cold. The woman sat at the heavy oak table, her hands wrapped around a tin mug of coffee, so hot the steam dampened her hair. She watched him, every move, every limp in his step, every time his hand went to his hip, where a holster used to be. "My name is Clara," she said suddenly. The silence had finally broken her. Elias kept his back to her, flipping the pork. "Clara is a fine name. Means bright." She let out a bitter laugh. "Nothing is bright where I come from. Silas Vane took the valley. He took the water rights. And when my father wouldn't sign the deed, he took him too." Elias's hand froze for a heartbeat. Just one. Then he moved the skillet off the heat. "I grew up in a place like that," Elias said quietly. "A place where men thought they could own the rain and the wind." "Then you know why I'm here," Clara said, leaning forward. "I don't want justice. Elias, there is no law in the valley. I want him to see the face of the man who ends him. I want him to know that he can't buy everyone. She pulled a small, silver locket from her neck and laid it on the table. It was battered, the silver worn thin. This is all I have left. My father gave it to me. He told me to find the ghost. He said the ghost was a man who knew what it meant to lose everything. Elias finally turned around. He brought a plate of food and set it in front of her. He didn't look at the locket. He looked at her hands. They were small, but the knuckles were scarred. She'd been fighting. Eat, he said. I don't want to eat. I want to know if you can take the job. Elias sat across from her. He picked up his own coffee, his eyes fixed on the flickering shadows on the wall. Silas Vane has 20 men, maybe 30. He has a stone house and a Gatling gun on the porch. You're asking for a suicide mission, Clara. I don't care if I die, she yelled, slamming her hand on the table. The coffee splashed over the rim. He's gone, Elias. My brother is gone. My father is gone. I'm the only one left to remember their names. If I die, at least I'll die doing something other than hiding in the brush like a rabbit. Elias looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the fire in her, the same fire that used to burn in a boy he once knew, a long time ago in a house that didn't exist anymore. If you're still here listening to this, Elias said, though he seemed to be speaking to the shadows, you might think you know how this ends. You think you've seen this story before. A man, a gun, a girl with a grudge. But out here in the West, the truth doesn't always wear a white hat or a black one. Sometimes, the truth is just a scar that never quite heals. If this story is hitting you in the chest, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you want to see if Clara gets her revenge, make sure you're subscribed, because the wind is shifting and the storm is just getting started. Elias heard them first. He always did. He stood up, his joints popping like dry kindling. He went to the window and pulled back the heavy wool curtain just an inch. 4 riders. They weren't ranchers. They wore matched duster coats and hats pulled low. They rode horses that cost more than most men made in a year. Vane's men. They're here, Elias said. His voice had changed. It wasn't the voice of a rancher anymore. It was cold. It was flat. It sounded like the edge of a blade. Clara stood up, her hand flying to the small pistol tucked into her belt. Her face went from angry to terrified in the blink of an eye. Stay in the cellar, Elias ordered. No, I'm not hiding. Elias turned, and for the first time, he let her see it. The look, the one that gave him his name. His eyes weren't gray anymore. They were like 2 chips of flint. In the cellar, Clara. Now, if you want Silas Vane, you stay alive. That's the deal. She hesitated, then saw something in his face that made her blood run cold. She nodded and ducked into the small crawl space beneath the floorboards. Elias didn't reach for a shotgun. He didn't hide. He walked out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. He sat in his old rocking chair, picked up a piece of cedar and a small whittling knife, and waited. The 4 riders thundered into the yard, kicking up a wall of white powder. They circled the porch, their horses dancing, nervous. The leader was a man with a wax mustache and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His name was Miller. He was Vane's primary shadow. Afternoon, old-timer, Miller said, his hand resting easily on the pommel of his saddle. We're looking for a stray, a girl, about so high, it smells like trouble and desperation. Elias didn't look up from his wood. A long curl of cedar fell to the porch. A lot of things smell like trouble out here. Mostly the men who ride onto other people's land without an invite. Miller's smile flickered. We ain't here for a lecture. We know she's here. Her horse is in the barn. Now, you can give her up and take 100 gold for your trouble, or we can burn this shack to the ground with you inside it. Vane doesn't like loose ends. Elias stopped carving. He looked at Miller. Vane always did have poor taste and help. He sends 4 men to do a job that requires a dozen. Miller laughed. A short, sharp sound. You think you're tough, old man? You're a relic, a ghost. And ghosts don't bleed. But men do. Miller went for his gun. He was fast. He was one of the fastest in the territory. But Elias wasn't a man anymore. He had a memory of violence. He didn't draw a gun. He threw the whittling knife. It caught Miller in the meat of his forearm, making him howl and drop his Colt. In the same motion, Elias pulled a sawed-off 10-gauge in the underside of the rocking chair, a gun he'd had rigged there for 5 years. The roar of the shotgun was like the world splitting open. The second rider was blown clean off his horse. The other two scrambled, their horses bolting in the chaos. Elias didn't miss. He worked the lever with a mechanical, brutal efficiency. 3 shots, 3 men in the snow. Miller was the only one left, clutching his arm, his face twisted in shock and agony. He looked at Elias, who was standing over him now, the shotgun leveled at his head. "Tell Vane," Elias whispered. "Tell him the ghost is tired of waiting." Miller didn't wait for a second invitation. He scrambled onto his horse and rode like the devil was reaching for his stirrups. The yard went quiet. The only sound was a heavy breathing of the 2 remaining horses and the soft hiss of the falling snow. Elias stood there for a long time, the heat from the shotgun barrels making the air shimmer. Then he turned and went back inside. Clara was standing in the middle of the room, the floorboards pushed aside. She was staring at him, not with anger, not with hope, but with a dawning, terrible realization. You're him," she whispered. "The way you moved. My father told me stories about a man who could outrun his own shadow. He said that man died in the fire at Miller's Creek." Elias sat back down at the table. He felt old. He felt every one of his 50 years. A lot of things died at Miller's Creek, Clara. A house, a family, a boy who thought he could save the world. Clara walked toward him, her steps slow, deliberate. "My brother was there. He was 10. I was only 4. I remember the smoke. I remember him pushing me into the root cellar. He told me to stay quiet. He told me he'd come back." She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the heavy wool of his sleeve. "The ghost of Blackwood. That's what they call you. But that's not your name, is it?" Elias looked at her. He saw the little girl in the root cellar. He saw the 20 years of guilt he'd carried, thinking he'd left her to burn. He thought she was gone. He'd lived his whole life as a ghost because he didn't think he deserved to be a man. He didn't say it. Words were too small for this. Instead, Elias reached up and unbuttoned the cuff of his left sleeve. He rolled the heavy fabric back, exposing his forearm. There, carved into the skin, was a jagged, silver scar. It wasn't from a bullet or a knife. It was a distinct mark of a wolf's teeth, a twin set of punctures that trailed down toward the wrist. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "The winter, the great hunger," Elias whispered. "We were out checking the traps. You slipped on the ice. A gray female came out of the brush. She was starving. She went for your throat." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and a boy stepped in the way. He didn't have a gun. He just had his bare hands. "I told you," Elias said, his voice finally breaking. "I told you it wouldn't leave a mark on you. I told you I'd keep you safe." Clara fell into him then, not as a client, not as a vengeful soul, but as a sister who had finally found the piece of herself she thought the world had stolen. Elias held her, his large, scarred hands shaking as he clutched her to his chest. The ghost was gone. There was only a brother and a sister, and a debt 20 years in the making. Later that night, as the fire burned low and the stars looked down on the quiet ranch, Elias cleaned his guns. Not because he wanted to, but because the world wouldn't let them be. "He'll come for us," Clara said, her voice steady now. She was sitting by the fire, her father's locket in her hand. "Let him come," Elias said. He looked at the scar on his arm. It didn't ache anymore. For the first time in 20 years, the cold didn't feel so deep. "Before we go," Elias said, looking toward the door, "I want to ask you something. If you'd spent your life thinking you were the last one left, and then you found out the best part of you was still alive, what would you do? Would you keep running? Or would you stand and fight for the name you thought you'd lost?" Take a deep breath. If you're still sitting here with us, pour yourself another cup of coffee. This story, our story, isn't just about guns and gold. It's about the things we carry. the scars we hide, and the people we hide them for. If you felt the weight of that reveal, do me a favor. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. It keeps the fire going in this cabin. And don't forget to subscribe, because Silas Vane is coming, and he has no idea what kind of ghost is waiting for him in the shadows. Out here in the West, stories don't end with a sunset. They end when the last debt is paid in full. We'll see you in the next chapter. Stay safe, and keep your eyes on the horizon,